One of the aspects from the pure business standpoint is that very often those relationships are very one-sided, meaning that one party has more at stake than the other into the relationship. And so when you are not aligned in the way you see the relationship, it's really hard to converge towards a common objective, thus straining the relationship. So that's one of the aspects that you have here that shows that the supplier relationship management can be a bit tricky.
Okay, so traditional approaches tend to lack agility and fail to address complex challenges businesses face today. These approaches, they predominantly focus on transactional interactions rather than collaborative relationships. And they tend to neglect the broader strategic considerations that encourage long-term partnerships.
SRM, or supplier relationship management, has been overwhelmingly been a very traditional approach, very adversarial, if you like, a very binary approach, a numbers-driven approach to supplier management, largely because for so many years now, supply chain itself has been seen as an overhead, as is the case with any overhead. The emphasis is generally going to be one of driving costs down. Coming off the back of the pandemic, we're going to need to find different ways to meet the value targets, because the traditional category managed approach to driving performance is going to struggle. You know, as recession hits, business shrinks. As business shrinks, those predefined, pre-negotiated margins shrink too. The only things that don't are the value targets. They're still up here. So with that, we do need to find different ways to meet the value targets. And our suppliers, they'll probably relish the opportunity. Let's look at today's ecosystem. You've got an increasingly complex business landscape. Okay, with, for example, one country waking up, another country going to sleep, different languages, time zones, different operations, service lines, etc. And that's just the customer. Now overlay against that all of the different supplier interactions. It's a hugely complex place.
The other aspect is also related to the complexity and the number of supplier relationships that procurement has to deal with. And with more and more relationship, it's harder and harder to dedicate a meaningful time, meaningful attention to making sure you're doing the right thing. And that problem is only compounded by some issues with the availability of data and how technology behaves with that. Meaning that the buyer finds themselves in a way where they have too much to do and zero insight, and they often sometimes have to struggle to get the most basic data to help them guide the relationship. How often have we as buyer had to go back to the supplier and say, can you help me know how much I'm spending with you, please? Because we have a meeting coming up. That's a huge issue in today's world. You cannot manage a supplier relationship properly when you have that limited an access to data.
So when you try and operate that using traditional methods, and traditional method might mean working very in a performance managed way by looking at, for example, using spreadsheets. You can't manage today's complex environment with spreadsheets. That's number one. That's one big change that's required. But it's also an understanding of the change in attitudes, as I've alluded to earlier on about, driving better relationships, understanding that there are multiple customers in the ecosystem. So this gives rise to many, many different challenges. So attitude is a big one. Understanding that the landscape is changing, understanding that you can't meet the ebb and flow or chaotic, if you like, activity within today's complex environment with static processes. Supplier relationships require the nuance that humans bring. Okay, in order that we can do that, we need the AI to actually work. We need the artificial intelligence, the smart tech, Industry 4, Procurement 4 technology to support by taking away some of the manual tasks. It's going to do that anyway.
AI can have a lot of different benefits in handling relationship with suppliers. The ones I see at SpanHQ that can derive the most value is by making more data available to the buyer much faster. So having a shorter turnaround time to get up-to-date information. And perhaps more importantly, it's about surfacing patterns in your spend data that you would not have seen otherwise.
AI provides a powerful tool in terms of analysing a vast amount of information and gives deeper insights into supply performance and potential risks. Essentially, it allows users to work more efficiently and saves time on manual processes such as cross-referencing information that you might need to make better informed decisions on. In the case of e-sourcing, we tend to encourage our clients to use the AI functionality to set up potentially RFPs for new categories, of which you could set up within minutes instead of like spending months on researching that particular category. It's a real game changer.
So you think of email, you think of documentation, you think of voice, you think of chat, all this different stuff. It's all unstructured data, and there's loads and loads and loads of value inherent in it. But it's hemorrhaged because it's not utilized. As I've said, we've spent years focusing on the numbers, looking down at the systemic data. Things are changing very, very fast. So think about your average supplier relationship or a supply chain ecosystem. That is, with all of those different mediums of data that I've just referred to, that's all unstructured data. So think about what Gen AI can do with that level of unstructured data in a compartmentalized, relevant way. If that data was structured into with a small s, because we're not trying to turn unstructured data into structured data, but if we could organize that data into something that we could then manage and measure, the opportunities are huge, huge.
If you spend less time chasing your data, cleaning it, and finding insights, it means you have more face time with your stakeholders to say, hey, that's what I have noticed in the spend patterns with that supplier. What do you think? What should we do? So more time engaging with your stakeholders to understand what is your position in that relationship, but also more time to engage with the suppliers and see what is the reason behind the pattern. If there is an issue, how can we find solutions? So overall, AI here will bring procurement and the stakeholder a lot closer and a lot more frequently in front of the supplier. And I mean, it's all about the relationship there. So the more time you spend together, the stronger the bond you can make.
It needs to take some of that more manual activity away, freeing up people to climb the value ladder, to do more of the creative engagement, to work in the nuance. That's what we're good at. That's where the relationship, that's where supplier relationships flourish. Okay.
We know that AI can bring a lot of value to procurement, but the question is always, okay, how do I get there? Where do I start? And so rather than giving you a step-by-step roadmap, I would probably look first at three things. The first thing is, what's your pain point? Okay, where do you have issues? So you need to start understanding what are the things that could work better, that you could spend less time on to free up some time to invest in the relationship itself, not the preparation. So that first assessment of your situation and of your pain point, for me, is really the first starting block.
With any adoption of new technology, the key here is change management. Embrace the need for change management and first and foremost, identify your goals and metrics of successfully implementing and adopting AI. Keep in mind that every department, every discipline, every role will have a different need when it comes to AI.
80% or upward of 80% of a company's revenue is generated outside a company's immediate borders by its supply chain, by its suppliers. So how could something of such size not be an intrinsic part of digital transformation, i.e. the supplier relationship. And so it's very important to actually think of that relationship in a digital term, through a digital lens, and that is understanding the digital infrastructure, which is something that we do. Obviously, it's a PICO with a digital relationship layer, without going into details there, but it's the digital infrastructure that you first create with your supplier relationships in order that you can then use the Gen AI, the generative AI, to actually analyze that data to harness the value that lives within it.
The second thing, once you have understood your own situation, is to understand what AI is, because there's a lot of portmanteau word, of cliche, of a lot of things around AI, and everybody's talking about Gen AI, but that's just one of the tools in the toolbox. And until you've understood what it means, what it can do, what it cannot do, what it should not do, then you can start forming a more educated opinion on, hey, what can AI do for me, and where do I need to look? Because you might not need Gen AI, but rather invest in advanced neural network or in large language models. So until you get a baseline understanding of what is AI, what are the various components that all together make up AI, you have no chance of finding the right solution. So spend some time, meet some vendor, watch some YouTube videos, but get a better understanding of what AI is.
Choose curiosity over fear. Get your team on board early. Allow your employees to experiment with AI tools. I think it's really crucial to invest in training. And with that in mind, I would say assess and reassess your AI needs. AI is evolving and advancing every minute. Learning to work with AI will be a continuous process, not just a one-time training session.
And the third aspect is putting it all together, but putting it all together in a way that will work for your company. We all want to do AI in one way, shape, or form, but the right way will be very dependent on what your company as a whole can stomach and how it ticks. So that would be the third and probably the more important piece of advice. So
AI, in my experience, as mentioned earlier, is a powerful enabler where we've already discussed that it can analyze a vast amount of information in a very short period of time. It isn't, however, going to replace human interaction. Human oversight remains crucial to building meaningful and trusted relationships. This isn't something that can be replaced by technology.
There are a few factors that make for a bad supplier relationship. I think that the first one is that the relationship might be one-sided or too one-sided. And unfortunately, that happens often, and sometimes because of the supplier and sometimes because of procurement. So I'd say that you need to have some balance, and you need to recognize that it takes two to make a good deal, to strike a good deal, because otherwise you're already poisoning the relationship even before it starts in the form of a contract. Another aspect of that, and that's probably an evolution of that, is sometimes people are called a strategic client or a strategic supplier, but there is no substance to that. It's just a tag you apply on a supplier. I would not even say a relationship, because sometimes they're not even a relationship. And if you just use words and that there are no acts that actually go with these words, it's useless. And again, the relationship is fake.
So we're going to start with lack of communication. This is always likely to lead to misunderstandings, delays, and missed opportunities for collaboration. Leading on from communication, unmet expectations. When suppliers consistently fail to meet expectations, it can strain relationships. The solution really here is to be crystal clear on agreeing performance metrics. If you're vague on these, it leaves you open to misinterpretations and misunderstandings. Lack of transparency, when this is absent, it erodes confidence and the collaboration suffers on both sides.
You think of it this way: the relationship is the atom. It sits at the middle of everything. If you drive a better relationship, everything that flows from that will improve. If you look at risk, for example, before relationship, it's almost like looking at trying to fix symptoms without understanding the source. So it's very important. The relationship is the nucleus, if you like, at the beginning, at the center of everything.
There are a few steps that procurement can take to develop better and more strategic or more fruitful relationship with their suppliers. One is having a conversation with their stakeholders, with the business, to understand what are we looking for in the relationship with that vendor. Because you might come up to a situation where a supplier has a small spend or a small volume of spend with you that has a critical importance on the business, and you may not necessarily realize it. So having this understanding with your business on who are the key suppliers and how much do we need to invest in the relationship, that's already a first part.
It's very, very important for customers and suppliers alike to recognize that they are not alone as customers or suppliers. And when that, if that is understood, it sets out a better playing field, a more collaborative and I should say co-resilient playing field, because resilience is only true resilience if it's co-resilience.
The other part is to have a more quantitative view of the relationship, and for that you need the proper data. So how can procurement get to that? Well, that's for me the second step is make sure that you invest in the right technology to know where you stand when it comes to the supplier. That is knowing the spend with the supplier, but for example, in the business to business side of the world, your supplier might also be your client. So under this, understanding the balance of trade or the balance of power with you as a supplier and you as a client, that's very important. So getting to a more data-driven and educated view on the relationship also helps a lot, because that helps clarify a lot of misunderstandings.
Co-resilience is based on collaboration, and so it's a need for in order to make co-resilience work, you've got to be more open, you've got to be more visible, you've got to create access, you've got to be supportive.
Focus on value creation. Shift your focus from transactional interactions to value creation opportunities. And this is for all suppliers, regardless of the categories.
You need to define the way you are going to handle the relationship with the suppliers in a programmatic way. You need to segment your suppliers, and based on the segments, you need to define what are the expectations from each other and how often and how you will interact with each other. Because when you have many thousands or tens of thousands of suppliers in your supply base, you cannot just have an ad hoc approach to relationship. You need a framework to govern those relationships. One is purely internal, is how do you get your people to understand what we are talking about? Because ESG means a lot of things. There is the environmental impact, there is the governance impact. Here in the US, there's a lot of things around diversity. So understanding what we are talking about, understanding what's in it for the company, and making sure that people enter conversations equipped with proper knowledge of what is at stake. Because if your company is producing chemicals, or if you're in the staffing industry, well, your impact on the planet and on society will be somehow rather different because just of your industry.
Things are changing now. Legislation has teeth. These things are very, very important. But you still can't impose them. It doesn't work. It's been tried. 95% or 95% plus of organizations out there globally are SMEs. And the further you go upstream in the supply chain, the smaller those companies become. And a lot of those companies are struggling to pay the bills. They're struggling to keep the lights on. They don't have the processes or the standards in place. But as we said, that legislation is being pushed out.
When you look at diversity, equality, and inclusion, it's a bit of the same. As an employee, as a colleague, am I better in a workforce that is diverse, where we have a lot of different cultures, a lot of different perspectives on the world? And if that applies with us, will it apply with our suppliers? Do we consider that having a diverse supplier base is useful or not? So start with this internally.
But there is absolutely a recognition that innovation comes through better diversity. It's a fact. It's a fact. I mean, collaboration and innovation is you can't innovate unless you have diversity of thought, for a start. And so that's the key thing. So we are already seeing much more deployment of KPIs and barometers that measure levels of diversity within the supplier ecosystem.
The other way you can embrace that is also by going outside of the building. Meaning we in procurement are really an interface between the internal needs of our company and the market. So go and talk to your suppliers, because there's a good chance that they only do one thing for a living, and they probably do it very well and with a lot of depth. So ask them. So get the knowledge where it is, and they will actually help you understand what you should be doing and why you should be doing.
Embracing sustainability and supply diversity isn't just a checkbox exercise, it's a strategic imperative to stay ahead. Relying on outdated manual input tools such as spreadsheets isn't going to cut it. Forward-thinking companies are leveraging advanced supplier performance platforms as well as supply onboarding technologies with integrated ESG and AI functionality to gain real-time insights into supply performance. These tools tend to have reporting capabilities and dashboard functionalities, so they literally have information at their fingertips.
The fact is, organizations need to create more visibility, not just for them as customers, but for their suppliers. Their suppliers need the visibility. Give the suppliers the visibility, the ownership, the access. Give them involvement. Take them on the journey. It's the only way to make this work. Okay. Otherwise, your ESG, CSR disciplines, programs of improvement aren't going to get much further than your tier one suppliers. Because visibility only goes as far as your tier one. You can't see round bends, you can't see beyond the boundaries of a contract. So you need to bring your suppliers on the journey, they need to bring their suppliers on the journey, and so on and so forth.
It's really hard to get started when it comes to ESG. And one of the things we've found working with our client is to start by making things visible. Okay. And sometimes it's really hard because a lot of the benefits you can find in ESG might be qualitative as opposed to quantitative. So it becomes really hard to track them. So what we've been helping some of our clients do is simply flag their projects as, hey, we've touched the notion of ESG there, be it in terms of sustainable procurement or diversity and inclusion. They're not trying to measure KPIs here. They're just trying to see, to begin with, where they have addressed that question. Once you have done that and you've picked the interest of your C-suite, then that's where you can start industrializing a bit things and make things measurable, set targets to do that. And the moment you set targets, again, if we're talking about procurement, you cannot succeed without your suppliers. So that's where you need to start socializing these goals and these targets with your suppliers. And again, you cannot succeed on your own. So that's where you start engaging the relationship with your supplier, not only on a transactional basis, but also on a more ESG approach, and you work with them to find the right levers you can pull to succeed in that.
It's important to create an equitable place for smaller organizations as well to become involved, to take responsibility. This stuff still needs to be done, but if you want to engage, you want to encourage the right behavior, then you need to practice inclusion. You need to bring them along on the journey, make them feel included.
More than ever, technology here can help. It can help track, it can help measure, it can help identify a lot of things that you would not otherwise be able to see. And if I can take an example, we help our clients not only identify the spend they have with diverse suppliers, but we can also position them in a benchmark. And the benefit of benchmarks is not only to take pride in the fact that you're good, but it's also looking where you are a laggard, because that's most likely where you will find the low-hanging fruits that will help you actually move the needle and do the right thing. And again, making an assessment of where you are, finding opportunities, and then making sure you follow up on these initiatives and that you track their results. That's the whole panel of things that technology can help our clients achieve when it comes to ESG. And again, if you have data, if you have numbers, if you have trends, if anything does not go your way, or if you want to accelerate on something, it's only when you are equipped with your data, with this data, that you can discuss with the stakeholders or with your suppliers how you can get more. The first one is that we're entering a state of scarcity of a lot of resources. And so as a result, you need to secure as procurement your access to those resources, because everybody is fighting for them or competing for them. And on the flip side of that, you also need to find solutions to need less of those resources, because as they become scarce, you need to limit your reliance on them.
What's really, really important is the ability to create narrative, understand. So rather than just having a KPI dashboard, or lots of KPI dashboards, it's the narrative behind the KPIs that's really important. And the narrative is not just one-sided. It's this equitable space for your supply chain to come together. The unstructured data layer. Now, 90% of company data is unstructured. We've got to look at large language models. They focus on the unstructured data. That's their playground. So we think that we are going to see a lot more of this unstructured data within a supply chain setting. It's almost a private large language model, private to a supply chain, to a business ecosystem.
Isn't necessarily a trend, but the focus that I'm finding in the market, speaking to suppliers and to buying organisation, is there is a focus on promoting sustainable practices, which then enable fostering innovation and engaging stakeholders to align environmental, social and governance standards.
The other aspect that will shape, in my view, the relationship you will have with your suppliers is that more and more the public opinion becomes aware of incidents and actually pays attention to incidents. And this can have a terrible effect on a company if the public opinion takes offense in something that happens. And what we generally find is very often a supplier is involved. There have been examples in the clothing industry where a building collapsed and that created a well-deserved outrage. Or you will have some problem with food quality or food poisoning. And you can generally always trace that back to supply chain issues. So now companies will have an even more vested interest in making sure that they have the right relationship with the right suppliers to avoid down the chain that the public opinion takes offense in what your company is doing. So I don't know if it's for better or for worse that there could be such a massive outburst in public opinion, but that's a trend you cannot ignore. So overall, it will be good if you have a better management of your relationship with the supplier. And if it can avoid a backlash in the public opinion, well, everybody wins.